I want to take a couple of minutes and really drill down on South Sudan. Despite a ceasefire that was signed in late January and a second round of peace talks now taking place in Ethiopia, the violence has raged on in some parts of South Sudan. Clashes erupted in Jonglei state over the weekend between pro and anti-government forces. Local authorities say 3 villages targeted by anti-government troops ended up being destroyed. UN investigators, meantime, looking into possible human rights violations, including mass killings. It has been one rocky road for the world's newest nation since it gained independence in 2011. It first struggled with neighboring Sudan over oil rights, and when the taps finally began to flow, the violence within the country slowed down its badly needed oil production. It also caused hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes. Now more than 700,000 are displaced inside South Sudan, many without clean water, adequate food, and shelter. The problems go back to some deep-rooted political and ethnic rivalries. President Salva Kiir accused his former vice president, Riek Machar, of mounting a coup. Machar denies that claim, but the two men, longtime political rivals. They're also from 2 different tribal clans. Kiir is from the Dinka tribe, Machar from the Nuer. John Prendergast, the co-founder of the Enough Project, has just returned from a fact-finding mission to Bor. He joins us now from Washington. The ethnic violence, has the situation calmed down? How do you prevent it from recurring?
Well, you've targeted the right issue here. There were political disputes. The political disputes took the country back to war. It's not uncommon, by the way. Many countries that come out of war, probably 75% of them go back into war at some point in the next few years. So this is standard stuff. But what's different about South Sudan is that they're targeting people on the basis of their identity. They're targeting people on the basis of their ethnicity, as you pointed out, between Dinka and Nuer particularly, which are the 2 biggest ethnic groups in the country. And that's spiraled the violence out of control in some of these locations where people, again, are being targeted because of who they are. And some terrible atrocities are occurring. We're seeing the kind of things that we saw in Rwanda in 1994 and in other places where the word genocide was used. So that's the real fear, is that you've uncorked this taken the genie out of the bottle of ethnic violence, and you don't know how you can contain it so quickly because of how deep it's already become.
Doesn't there have to be accountability?
I think that's the word. If there was one word I'd say, well, what do we need to do about this? You know, there is a peace process. That process will take some time to build, and we've got to invest heavily in figuring out a political accommodation between these various parties. But at the end of the day, this cycle of violence, this cycle of impunity just continues, and people who commit terrible atrocities in the interest of staying in power or trying to gain power, you know, they have no accountability. Nothing ever happens to them. So I think this time the buck has to stop, and they say, well, there has to be some measure of justice for the crimes that are committed, and there has to be some reconciliation between the communities that have been used so cynically by the politicians.
You know, everybody looks back. I remember the first time I met someone from South Sudan. Of all places, it was in Baghdad. These people have been flung, not just for years, but for decades, out of their homeland. They suddenly believe we have a nation of our own, a place where we can build our lives. Now, upwards of 1 million of them are on the run once again. They're refugees. Are they losing trust in the vision of a country of their own?
Yeah, I think they've lost trust in the politicians. And I think that really, at the end of the day, in the peace process that's being constructed in Addis Ababa, there has to be a more inclusive table, a negotiating table, not just the 2 biggest guys with the biggest guns and their representatives. We need to have the church leaders and the women's organizations, youth leaders, people who are representative of the larger aspirations of this new nation, to be represented, to have their views represented about how the future of the country and the government should be constructed. Otherwise, we're going to just go right back to where we were December 14th before this war erupted. So there has to be more inclusivity at the table where everybody's views gets to be taken into account, not just those that have the biggest guns.
The oil, it was thought that the billions of dollars of revenue from that was going to fund schools, hospitals, improve the lives of people, but we saw very quickly the battles centering around the oil-producing regions of South Sudan. Has it become a curse?
Yes, I think you find that almost everywhere, sadly, around the world, where oil is discovered, especially in new, weak states, that immediately leads to political competition, which then usually leads to conflict. So again, South Sudan is not very unusual. The question is, what do you do about it? And in different states, different things have been attempted. And I think the most promising thing would be to have financial management and accountability systems which had some international involvement, some international oversight. So we don't, so all the parties in South Sudan who are vying for political power don't worry that the money is going into the pockets of certain people who will then use it to finance their military objectives. So I think that's the key, is to have more international involvement in partnership with those on the ground who are really trying to build their country, using the money from the oil and other minerals that are there blessed in abundance in South Sudan, use it for the betterment of the country.
John Prendergast with uncommon insight into many things African, but certainly the situation in South Sudan. We're really grateful you could spare a few minutes for us today to discuss the situation there after you've just come back. Really appreciate it, John.
Thank you.